are you doing tonight, Signa?
Fantastic. Happy to be here. Happy to have everyone here with us.
Good. We've got about 9 people on right now. We're going to wait just a few more minutes,
Great.
and just wait for everybody to give them time to log in, and we'll see people popping in here. I have a question for you. What's your favorite color, Signa?
It's green. What's yours?
We were just talking about this. Like, how do you make small talk on a webinar? You ask what your favorite color is, and then what
Or
you're binging on Netflix or Amazon or something like that.
right. And we could talk about that for the whole hour.
We probably could, actually. Okay, I think we should go ahead and get started, unless you feel like you want to wait a little bit more.
Nope. Hopefully people will pop in, but we'll say the early bird gets the worm. They'll get all the full program here. How's that?
I like it.
Great.
Okay, a couple of just housekeeping things. Feel free, please, everybody, to fill up our Q&As, the question and answers with any questions you may have for Signa. I'd like to welcome Signa Whitson to our podcast, or webinar tonight. She's a wonderful author, an author of multiple books. And I would, instead of me just rambling on about who Signa is, let's just get started with give us a little bit of your background, Signa, and tell us both professionally and personally about you. We'd love to learn a little bit more about you.
Okay, absolutely. So my favorite color is green, and it has been green since I was little, very little. Professionally, I spent the earliest part of my career working as a therapist with adolescents in a residential treatment setting, which was just a stroke of great luck and fortune and opportunity to be in my early 20s and get to work with kids with pretty significant emotional, social, and behavioral issues. Talking about adolescents whose aggressive behaviors can easily push adults away. But I learned the importance of staying connected with kids, no matter what, not letting ourselves be alienated from young people, and then really using that connection to help young people in their healing. So my 3-word mantra since the beginning of my career is to look beyond behavior and sort of figure out what is motivating a child's behavior, what's fueling their misbehavior. So I've been working with children and families ever since. Right now I'm the director of counseling at a preschool through 8th grade independent school in Pennsylvania. Have also been the chief operating officer of the LSCI Institute for the last 12 years. And I'm a mom of 2 teen girls, which means I'm living this parenting stuff at the same time that I'm trying to help other people through it.
You're living the dream.
I am living the dream. I love being a mom. It's the best thing ever.
That's great. So you mentioned the LSCI Institute. You want to tell us a little bit about that and give us a little bit of a background on the LSCI Institute?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So the Life Space Crisis Intervention Institute is an international training organization. We teach adults some very specific skills for how to reach and teach troubled kids. We work with professionals and parents all around the world, United States, Canada, Europe, a little bit in Australia, New Zealand as well. And we offer a very brain-based, trauma-informed, but also very relationship-centered way of helping kids change problematic behavior.
Great. That's fantastic. And how long did you say you were with that organization?
So in June of the year 2000, I attended my first LSCI training, and I can honestly tell you I've been using LSCI every single day as a professional and as a parent, but I have been in a leadership role with the Institute for the last 12 years, since 2007.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So tonight, this evening, we're going to be talking about your new book, Parenting the Challenging Child, and the subline is the 4-step way to turn problem situations into learning opportunities. So my first question for you is, what motivated you to write this book? what gave you the insights to do this?
So it's really back to the LSCI Institute again. The LSCI Institute has been around for nearly 30 years, providing training, mainly for professional educators, counselors, youth workers, people in mental health. And the most common feedback that we would receive for years was people saying, you know, I can instantly go back to my program, go back to my classroom and use these skills with the kids that I work with. But you know what? I'm taking them home and I'm applying them to my parenting. You know, you guys should really offer a class for parents. So we heard that feedback over and over. And around 2012, we actually established the Parents Division of the LSCI Institute, and we started offering exactly what people had asked for, trainings that translated LSCI's 5-day program to a shorter time frame and just the unique needs of parents and caregivers in home situations. And so what we've been hearing for the last 7 years is, this is fantastic. I want more people, you know, I want my cousin, I want my neighbor, I want someone else to get this training. Do you have this for people that can't attend training at one of your national training sites? You really ought to write this book. So we just took feedback again, and last summer, we took all these things that we've been training and really using for decades now and put it into what is meant to be a very practical, realistic book for parents and caregivers.
That's great. And so when you're getting those motivations, is there any anecdotal things that spark while you're doing that?
Oh, there are anecdotal things that spark all the time. Things that happen at home. And, you know, again, because I'm a school counselor and I'm using LSCI every day, there's always situations that come up that are either great fodder for going directly in the book or just, you know, becoming composites of being able to share experiences with really challenging kids or challenging situations and how to use this set of skills to work through them.
So, you know, one of the things that's always a mystery, I think, to people that haven't been through the process is the actual process of writing a book like this. And I think giving people that are on our webinar it would be really nice to give them a little peek behind the curtain. Can you just talk about your process? And I realize everybody's process is different, but can you talk about your process and who's involved and how you sculpt the message and how you organize your thoughts and things like that?
Sure. So there's probably a lot of angles to that question. The first thing I think about when you say process is that I have learned that first thing in the morning is my process. When I first started writing, my kids were younger and I would, you know, sort of spend all day working on the outlines or things like that and figure out what I wanted to write when I finally would be able to sit at my computer at night. And then I would just find myself really irritable and cranky and trying to rush my kids to bed and, you know, aggravated when they were little children and they didn't want to go to bed, you know, at the exact bedtime. And after maybe 2 weeks of that, I said, I can't do that. You know, I've got to be a mom and give my kids a loving bedtime. So I discovered very early morning, and with my coffee in hand, I sit down with, you know, the outlines, with all the anecdotes, with all of the, you know, practical LSCI training material that I want to write about. And I just give myself a dedicated couple of hours every morning. I'm pretty disciplined about it when I'm writing, but I like to do it early in the morning when I'm not getting any social media notifications, no one's emailing me, just to really have that undistracted time. So that's sort of like the nuts and bolts of the process. The rest of it for me is always trying to write with the goal to be super practical and super real and super down to earth. I think all that sort of fluffy, pie in the sky, perfect parenting, you know, perfect professional kind of stuff really doesn't exist. And it just makes all of us end up feeling bad about ourselves or
Right.
about our kids or about our reality. So, if anything, my process is to write for professionals as a professional, the challenges and everything. And then to write for parents as a parent who knows that not every moment is perfect, but relationships heal, love goes a long way. The way we respond to kids is a whole lot more important than their behaviors. It's going to be what we do, not what they do, that really makes a big difference. So,
Right.
yeah.
And so do you work with anybody when you're writing the book? Is there somebody that works with you to, do you have an editor that you always use that you really enjoy working with?
I have actually worked with a number of different editors. They've all been fantastic, and 3 different publishing companies now, mostly because I think every publisher sort of has their own niche.
Right.
And I've written on the subject of passive aggressive behavior. I've written about bullying prevention. I've written about helping kids manage anger, and now this parenting book. So, yep, I've worked with a lot of different people. With the LSCI book, I couldn't have a better possible team than the people at the LSCI Institute and the other trainers. So I put this book together, but it's on the shoulders of decades and decades of work of a lot of other people who created the LSCI Institute and the trainers who've been carrying out, the training and what we do.
Right. So let's talk about the book a little bit, which is, I'm sure, what most people want to learn about. Give us some of the main topics of the book from start to finish, if you could.
Okay. Yep. So the book is Parenting the Challenging Child, and it is about using problem situations as learning opportunities. The beginning of the book, we talk about foundational skills, starting with, in a conflict, in a problem situation, a young person is coming in with a ton of emotion. And their emotional brain, their amygdala, is really activated. So we spend a good amount of time talking about, first of all, what's going on in a young person's brain during a period of stress. And we use neuroscience as our guide to think about, all right, how do we take advantage of what we know about the brain and what's going on to use specific strategies to help the brain calm down. And then when we've helped a stressed out young person calm down, we talk about specific skills for how to help that child bring some language to all of their emotion. When kids can actually put some words to this jumble of overwhelming emotions, it helps them to activate the thinking, frontal part of their brain instead of the emotional midbrain. So we spend a lot of time on these kind of practical de-escalation, listening skills. But then the bulk of the book is spent on identifying 6 of the most common patterns of self-defeating behavior among children and families. And then we talk about when we recognize this pattern, what do we do with it? What do we say? The book is full of examples of dialogue, suggested language, sort of guides for how to manage our own emotions while we're managing a child's emotions, and also how to use the emotion of a situation to bring about changes in how a child is perceiving a situation, thinking about a situation, behaving. And then, we also spend quite a bit of time practicing role-playing with kids, new skills, so that when that same kind of situation happens again, they don't fall into that same type of self-defeating behavior.
Great. That's great. Any other tidbits of information that you think come out of that? Any other hot topics or main topics?
I think actually at the webinar last time, someone asked a question about, does this book work for young people on the autism spectrum?
Right.
And I gave some information about how one of our particular interventions, called the New Tools intervention, is just a great fit for young people who miss social cues. And there's some other things we have called the reality check, which is fantastic for young people who sort of perceive reality based on their own history, their own emotion, as opposed to maybe the same way an adult or a sibling would perceive a situation. So and sometimes there's some overlap with kids on the autism spectrum there too. We have an intervention called the SOS that's all about sort of explosive kids who are looking for a power struggle and sort of go into relationships and interactions with adults in sort of very combative ways. So, I guess my other tidbit to answer your question is that I have found that there's something for everyone, and I hope that readers will find that also. It's a very relatable book that I think people will be able to open and be like, that's my kid, and that's me, and that's how I sometimes end up making a situation worse instead of making the situation better. And now I've got some ideas on how I can sort of turn that around.
Right. That's great. So that's a great lead in to my next question, which is, how do you feel like this book is different from, the standard parenting book out there? How to parent your child in general? How did you position this book differently?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. That's a great question. And I know there's so many resources out there, not the least of which is Google, where you can just sort of type in any question in the world. But there are some things that I'm proud to say really set LSCI training and this LSCI Skills for Parents book apart from all of the other things that you can find out there. The first is that it's really, really solution focused. It is really practical. I know that theory is important, and LSCI has that. It's trauma informed, it's brain based, it's all about relationship and connection, which is what the research says is really important. But I know that when I'm going to get a book or attend a training, what I want is information on what do I say, what do I do? How do I handle this situation? Right. It's for those moments that I freeze up and I can't think of what to do. So this book is designed for those moments. It gives this 4-step way to interact with kids so that, if kids say something and take us by surprise, we don't have to freeze up and feel like we lost all our parenting skills. We give people a very structured process so they always sort of know where they are in a conversation with a child and then where to go next to lead to these sort of long-term relationship growth, but also behavioral change. So the practicality is one thing that I think sets our book apart. And the other is we make no bones about the fact that the LSCI approach is not really about making children change. That is sort of a byproduct of the fact that the LSCI approach is really about us as adults, as parents. How are we responding to our kids? Are we responding in ways that are fueling conflict? Or are we responding in ways that can sort of turn down the heat on a conflict and actually make a situation better? Are we teaching skills and helping kids, learn the skills that they need, or are we just sort of relying on rote punishment all the time? Obviously, the LSCI approach is that we want to teach kids new skills. We want to build the relationship. But I think that sets LSCI apart also, that we're not starting with the kid, we're starting with us. And really that's where the power is, because it's hard to change other people. But if we're willing to look at ourselves, try to change our approach a little bit, then we've got a shot at making a difference.
Right. I agree with that. And so why don't you give us a time when maybe, you've used those skills that you write about, because you're in the midst of this all the time as a counselor, as a parent. How do you use the skills? Do you want to give us an example or a story maybe that might back that up?
Sure. Yep. I have a story that has to do with my own daughter. I won't say which one. It was many years ago. And I share this in the Parenting the Challenging Child book. So what happened was it was winter, sort of midwinter, and I think February. And I had left work early, sort of made special arrangements. I needed to go pick up my elementary school daughter to get a flu shot. And she knew this ahead of time. It was all planned. We usually go and get Frosties after something like a flu shot anyway, so it usually ends up being kind of a nice thing for her. But I went to school, I signed her out, and I walked out into the hall. And in her elementary school, there's sort of like a runway of a hall, a really, really long hallway. And so I'm standing out there waiting for her to walk toward me. And all of a sudden I see this yelling, screaming, puddly, crying mess of a child. And of course it's mine. And she's just walking to me like this death march. And, doors open, everyone's sort of like wondering who's this crying child in the hallway. And I start to walk toward her and she's walking toward me and she's just, you always do this to me. I always miss everything fun. And just on and on. And meanwhile, I'd just been in the office. I just, talked to the women in the front office. They know me. They know what I do for a living, school counselor, lady who writes these books about helping kids calm down. So I'm feeling all the pressure of like, oh my gosh, this is my child who's melting down in the hallway. And I think my first instinct as a parent, feeling that sort of pressure of other people's judgment, was to insist that my daughter quiet down and stop yelling. But I also know my daughter, and I know that if I had done that, that would have been sort of the next thing that made her even more overwhelmed. So what I did instead was I slowly walked toward her. I sort of knelt down to her level, and I just welcomed her in for a hug. And I said some really simple words just to acknowledge her emotion. I said, "You look really upset right now." And I don't mean to, not everything in parenting is easy, but those were some really easy words. And she melted into my arms. She just sort of like melted into a hug. The crying stopped, the wailing stopped. And she just said, yes. And then the nicest school nurse in the entire world had been standing there next to me because she was one of the people that came to see what the ruckus was in the hallway. And she said to my daughter, "Honey, your mom is just trying to help you. She wants you to get a flu shot so that you stay healthy all winter." And like that became the thing that set my daughter off again. I felt her in my arms just completely stiffen up again. She started to cry. She started to tell me again how she missed all the fun things. And I always picked her up early. And so again, in my mother's head, I'm like defensive. And what are you talking about? I never pick you up early. This is maybe the second time all year, and I had to take off work early to do this. And, all these thoughts are going through my head. But what I did instead was I just told those thoughts to be quiet. And I just sort of affirmed it again. I said, "You feel like I am always picking you up early, honey. You're really upset right now because you're going to miss out on some fun." And it was the same thing again. She melted again. She said, "Yes, you're picking me up. This is the second time you've picked me up early this year. And this is only the second time we've ever gotten to watch a movie in class. And I'm missing it again."
Wow.
So all of a sudden I understood. The last time I picked her up was in December, and we were leaving for Christmas vacation a little early. And indeed, I picked her up on that holiday when all they do, watch movies and have hot chocolate. And it just, our bad luck, this was the second time. So we walked out. Within about 2 minutes, the scene was done. We went and got a flu shot. We went and I think we got a Frosty. And then when she was home and she was calm, then we talked about what happened in school, because it still wasn't acceptable for her to make that scene, to be so loud, to be, accusing me of always doing this to her. But I also know my daughter well enough to know that when she was overwhelmed by emotion, when all she could think of was this running dialogue in her head about how bad things always happened to her and she always missed the movie, her frontal brain wasn't even working. So to try to be logical with her in the moment, with everyone staring at her, everyone staring at me, was not going to work out well. I knew that I needed to love her, hug her, acknowledge what she was saying, acknowledge her emotion, and we needed to go on with it. And later there would be a time to deal with the behavior, to tell her what I expected in the future when she was upset when I picked her up early.
Right. And how did she react when you spoke with her later?
I know, Mommy, I'm so sorry. I know I did that. I was just so upset. And I don't know why I did that. I'm really sorry. perfectly perfect. I mean, she was young at the time. I think she was only in second or third grade. So she didn't have like, an adult way of processing it with me,
Right.
but she perfectly calmly acknowledged, I know, I'm sorry. I was just so upset. I know I did the wrong thing.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
powerful.
And she actually apologized to the school nurse. That was her idea for how she could sort of make up for the people that she had disturbed. But that's the thing. I think with young people, there's always time to teach the new skill, to teach them what they could do better. But that's the beauty of parenting. The time is on your side, and we can make a choice not to use the most emotionally charged moment when kids aren't even available to us. Their thinking brain isn't even available. They're so wrapped up in their emotion. That's the kind of parenting lesson, the kind of examples that we talk about and sort of script through in the book, is when these situations happen, how do we de-escalate first, help kids put some language to the emotions first, and then later on, when they're fully calm, walk them through the desired behavior.
And do you think that logic just makes more sense once the emotion is brought down? Is that sort of the whole thought process behind it?
It makes more sense, and it's just responding to biology and to what what science has shown us about the brain.
Right.
It is impossible for young people, and it's impossible for us as adults also, to think clearly, to just access that logical, rational part of our brain when we're overcome by emotion. And telling kids, use your words is great advice, but they can only do that when they're calm.
Right.
So, using strategies to calm kids down, but also using ourselves to calm kids down. I always say that just like a cold is contagious, a virus is contagious, our calm is contagious also. And if we as adults can just stay solid, stay loving, stay calming during our kids' most stressed out moments, kids' brains are going to they're going to mirror our calm brains, and we're going to be able to get them to the point where then they can talk logically and rationally. But it's never going to happen in the heat of the moment.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. I do want to take a little bit of a break here and just remind our group on a couple of things. The first is you're more than welcome to ask questions. We will be taking some questions and having Signa do some answers to those questions at the end. And then we're also going to be giving away a book. And so Signa, you're going to get a chance to pick a number 1 through like 1,000,000, and then I'll assign that to one of our viewers, and then we'll announce at the end of the webinar who's going to be the big book winner. So
terrific. I've got a favorite color and a favorite number, so I already know what I'll pick.
Wow, that's fantastic. Okay, I like it. All right, so we talked a little bit about this, and obviously you use those skills as a parent, but you've also mentioned in the past about who else could benefit from a book like this. I'd love for you to maybe talk about that.
Yeah, everyone can benefit from a book like this, right? That's the standard answer. Honestly, I think anybody living or working with a young person who sometimes becomes overwhelmed by their emotions and that can act out in stress would benefit from the insights in the book. I've been talking about the brain a lot in the last few minutes, and we don't spend a ton of time in the book talking about neuroscience, but we do sort of break down what happens in a young person's brain during times of stress, and explaining to people who live with kids who get overwhelmed that this is a biological brain-based process. And I think knowledge is power. If we know that, then we resist the inclination to take a child's behaviors personally. And when we don't take the behaviors personally, we can respond calmly instead of sort of reactively or defensively. So, my goal is that biological parents, adoptive parents, foster parents, anyone taking care of young people, anyone working with young people we'll all be able to find some things that are valuable and some good insights of how to really effectively reach young people during conflict situations.
That's great. And so, you obviously talked about LSCI earlier. How does LSCI support those next steps? If someone wants to actually take the next steps after reading the book, and learn more about it, how does that organization and your part in that, how does that support them?
Okay. Yeah. So LSCI actually provides a lot of options. For years and years, LSCI, sort of the standard thing we did was we offered a 5-day certification course in the skills of LSCI. And it's a graduate level course. You can get graduate credits for taking it. We had a number of professionals who were taking LSCI training. But as I said, in 2012, we created the Parents Division of the LSCI Institute. So now we offer specific trainings that are not so general for professionals. They're very adapted to the unique issues that are coming up at home and in families. We have a 2-hour training that we offer for parents, and we also have a full day training. It's a little bit more extensive. People can find out information, locations, trainers for all of that on our website under the Parents tab. And then we also, the LSCI Institute offers all kinds of trainings from 2 hours, 1 day, 2-day options to our, we still offer our 5-day certification for professionals, educators, counselors, youth workers, social workers, anyone who has made a career out of trying to reach and teach challenging kids. So maybe the short answer to your question was that lsci.org is the website, and all the information about the trainings that we offer to supplement the book are right there.
Great. And obviously that's one place where they can order your book. It's on the LSCI site.
Yep.
Great.
And I don't think it's on Amazon yet because it is so new. I just got the copies in my hand 2 days ago, but it will be on Amazon probably within the next 2 or 3 days.
Great. Awesome. So tell us this, you've finished this book, and the starving writer always wants to write the next book, of course. So do you have any plans on writing additional books or on this topic or any others? Do you have anything in the works right now?
You must be talking about a different starving writer. I heard someone say once that they dislike writing, but they love having written, and that fits me to a T. I've written a number of books right now, and I wouldn't say I've written any of them reluctantly, but all of them come with like a whole lot of information up here, and it's laborious to get it all on paper and figure out. And it's tough to get up so early in the morning and do all that. So every time I finish a book, I think that's the last book. I've written 5 now. That's something to be proud of. I've written 6. That's good. So now I'm on 7, and that's a lucky number. So I don't have any plans right now. But I didn't have any plans after the last one either. And this one, like I said, this one came up because a lot of people were taking our training and saying, we really want this in a book form. We want something that we can, not just attend a training once, but we can read it and then we can reread it and we can review it. So who knows, I guess is the answer to that question. Who knows what'll come next?
That's great. That's also slightly dodging the question, but we'll let you get away with that. We don't want you to give your ideas away at this point. So just in going back a little bit, I'm always fascinated by this. Do you want to talk about some of the other books that you have that maybe are relational to the current book, or things that, if somebody really likes this book, is there another one that they should go back and look at, to get some additional insights?
Sure. So another book that I co-wrote with the founder of the LSCI Institute, Dr. Nicholas Long, is called The Angry Smile. And The Angry Smile is all about passive-aggressive behavior, sort of that covert, hidden anger that can be so confounding and frustrating and confusing. I mentioned that in the Parenting the Challenging Child book, and in LSCI training, we deal with 6 of the most common patterns of self-defeating behavior among young people. And what we have found as an institute over the years is that there really is a 7th pattern there. And that is the pattern of young people being passive aggressive. But like I said, we already had a 5-day training. It was so extensive that adding a 7th pattern was kind of a lot. So we branched out several years ago to just focus on passive aggressive behavior alone. And we look at it at home, so between parents and children, but we also look at it in the workplace, in adult relationships. We look at it at school between parents and teachers, and then we look at it online, because in the last few years, we've really seen that online communication is just the perfect venue for passive aggressive behavior. So that was my most recent book project prior to this one. And other things I've written mostly have to do with bullying prevention. I have 4 books actually that I've written on that topic of helping, which is also related, right? Helping kids deal with conflict, helping them learn how to navigate, solve problems. And then I have a book that's called How to Be Angry, that is all about like sort of affirming that anger is a normal, natural human emotion, but teaching kids the skills they need to express their anger constructively instead of in relationship damaging ways.
Great. So we do have a couple of questions that I would love to pose to you.
Great.
The first one is, what is the best parenting advice you've ever received?
Oh gosh, the best I've ever received. Boy, you know what came to my mind first was the worst parenting advice I ever received, which was something about sleep while the baby's sleeping, which I remember that used to drive me crazy when I had babies, because I would have slept if I could, but I was so anxious and there was so much to do and so many worries. But actually now it's coming to me. I had a lovely angel in my life who helped take care of my older daughter when she was a baby, and when I first went back to work, and when I was just a ball of anxiety and what do I do with this baby, and how do I know if I'm doing this right or not? She said, Signa, you just have to love her.
Oh, wow.
And that was really good advice. I remember at the time I was like, I do love her, but I have to feed her and I have to keep her alive, and I don't, how do I get her to sleep, and all these other questions. But now my babies are 15 and 13, and I look back on that advice that she gave me when they were young, and I think that's the key, is just loving them for who they are, not necessarily for the child you thought they were going to be or the parent that you thought you were going to be. Loving them even when the day isn't going perfectly. And probably most importantly, loving them even when they're acting in really unlovable ways, because that's when they need you the most.
Right, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another question, which I love. This is a tough one. So what do you do when the parenting challenges are risky, drugs, alcohol, etc., things like that, and your teenager is shutting you out?
Yeah. That is a fantastic question. And I think I'd love a whole hour to deal with that one, because there's lots of advice I'd like to give. But here's one thing that I want to say, which is that connections matter. Relationships heal. And as parents, we want so badly to be the one that is doing that relating and that connecting. And sometimes we get to be that person. Sometimes we are our child's person, but sometimes we're not. And that's okay. As long as our child has someone, that's what's important. And it can be a teacher, it can be a coach, it can be a youth pastor, it can be a school counselor, it can be another relative, it could be a neighbor. There's so many people it could be, but sometimes it's stressful for kids to confide in their parents for a various number of reasons. One of them being they want to please us so badly. They want our approval so badly. And it's risky sometimes to have your parent know that you've messed up or you've messed up again. Sometimes kids need to go need to have somebody else outside of their parents. So, to answer that part of the question, what do kids need? I think they need connection and they need someone. And hopefully that someone is you, but if it's not, don't be hurt, don't be offended. Just make sure your child has as many trustworthy connections as possible, especially if they're engaging in risky behavior. They really are going to need that.
For sure. Here's a question. Is it ever too late to start changing that relationship? That's a very interesting question.
That's a great question. And I'm going to quote my LSCI trainer, my original trainer from the year 2000, who's still a very good friend. His name is Mark Fredo. He said once something to the effect of, I think maybe someone had asked him, like, are there ever kids that this stuff just isn't going to work? Are there some kids you would just give up on and none of this stuff is going to work? And he said, you know what? Yeah, probably there are some kids that nothing is going to work, but you never know who that child is. And so you have to try equally hard with every single child you meet, every single child you come in contact with. I think from a parenting perspective, no, I don't think it's ever too late. I think throughout their whole lives, throughout our whole lives, that connection between parent and child is so intense. That bond is so strong. I don't think it is ever too late. But even in sort of the non-parent-child relationship, I think some kids are adult wary and they push adults away and they might make you want to seem like it's too late. But I think I said before, those are the kids that need you the most. They need you to hang in there with them the most. And if they reject you, that's one thing, but I don't think we should ever reject them or agree to be alienated from them. I think as adults and parents, we keep trying always.
Right. I agree with that 100%. I have 2 kids, but they're college kids now. And so it's been interesting seeing them leave the house and the change in anxiety on the parents' part, mine and my wife, of knowing that we hope we've instilled as much as we can so that they make good decisions. And, I have a junior in college and a freshman in college, and, they have made small mistakes, luckily small, very small mistakes. But, when they make those mistakes, we're still parents and we still have to give advice and we still have to, try to instill maybe later on, hey, how could you have handled this differently type of a conversation. So even when they're not in your home, I think you still have to keep those parenting skills up. It's not easy. And I'm sure for those of us that do have kids that have left the nest, if you will, it's hard. It's really hard. One more question we've got here. There's been a lot of articles about children with depression and anxiety. Mm-hmm. Why do you think this is so prevalent right now?
Mm-hmm. I think there's probably a number of factors, right? Some of it's genetics and some of it's their environment that they're growing up in. I think there's 2 big things that I read about all of the time when I read those same articles. One is some people call it the death of play. I don't think play is dead, but we'll call it the decline in play among young people. I think there's a lot of science research and evidence that shows that there was a time when young people got to play without a lot of adult supervision, which meant that when they had conflicts, they had to figure out how to resolve those themselves. And when they were going to climb a tree or ride their bike too fast or do something a little bit risky, they sort of got to experience exactly how much risk they could take, how high up that tree they could climb, how fast they could go on their bike, how many people they could fit on that bike, or whatever the risk would be. And we've taken a lot of that away. We've taken a lot of the play, the unstructured play out of childhood. When kids have a problem, we rush in, we solve it for them. And it makes us feel great as parents. We don't want to see our kids hurt at all. But the problem is all of this supervision, all of the taking away any problem at the very beginning has created a generation of kids that don't know how to solve a problem when they're older. They become anxious, they become hopeless and helpless and more forlorn because they don't have a childhood worth of skills of resolving the conflict, taking the risk, dealing with the pain, dealing with disappointment, dealing with even real things like death. I know a lot of parents really struggle. They want to hide sort of the hard parts of life like death from kids, but death is a part of life. And there's developmentally appropriate times and ways to introduce this information to kids. So I think one of the things is that we have a generation of kids that are getting pretty old before they have any challenging life experiences that they have to handle themselves, and they're not prepared for it. And I think the other thing that we're seeing is definitely the impact of screen time. And I think, that's still such a big question mark, and the jury is still out on the effect of technology. But we do know that technology is changing young kids' brains. And we do know that when kids are online 9-10 hours a day, which is pretty typical for a growing number of kids, that there are changes to the limbic part of their brain, their emotional brain, and those changes are correlated with more anxiety, more depression, more risky behavior, and more aggressive behavior as well.
Great answer. Thank you for taking the time to answer that.
Sure.
Okay, so now to the fun part. I'd love for you to choose one of our lucky webinar attendees to get a free book, and we'll get their information. We actually we have their name, so we'll be able to get their information from their email.
Okay.
So I want you to pick a number between 1 and 50.
Okay. I'm going to pick number 11.
11.
And anybody who knows me, and if they have to pick between 1 and 20 or whatever they give me, it's always 11. And here's the book. I'm so happy because I just got my own copy, but this is the one I'll ship out to whoever wins. So
great.
Thank you, number 11, and everybody for joining us tonight.
I won't give the last name, but I will say that number 11 is Sherry.
All right.
So congratulations, Sherry. Thank you for being a part of the webinar. Thank you for everybody else as well. Signa, I wanted to thank you for taking the time out of your busy life and your family time, of course, to give some time to this and to talk about some of these things that are going on, and also to give people some insights on a amazing book that you've written. I've read a couple of the other books that you've written, and they're fantastic books. I unfortunately have not had a chance to read the new book yet because it just came out. But I'll
send you a copy too. You'll be number 1.
Oh, nice.
Send you a copy too. Yes.
Nice. Thank you. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure everybody else is as well. Let's just do one more time the best place to actually find the book and be able to purchase it.
Yep. So it is www.lsci.org. And if you click on the Parents tab, or just click on our Products tab, you will find it right away.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much again, Signa, for all your time.
Thanks everyone for coming and interrupting your family time. I know it's not easy, so I appreciate everyone who's here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you everybody for joining, and we will see you on a future webinar.
Terrific. Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.